How to remove the dis from your courage. Dis was a very interesting word when we grew up. Someone was dissing you when they didn't pay any attention to you, when they disregarded you or dismissed you, okay? And I remember feeling that my mother was dissing me, okay? Because she wouldn't listen to my sharing with her why I couldn't be home at a certain time when I was supposed to be. And it was like I wasn't even speaking, okay? The words were not going through. Communication was not happening. She was dissing me. And I thought of that when I thought of this title here. Of course, the diss is being removed from the courage. This talk here today on discouragement is the last in the series on changing the facts, FACTS, fixed attitudes causing troubling situations in your life. I'm happy that you're here with me and our video audience. Hello. Happy Palm Sunday to you. And today being Palm Sunday, that means that we are all on the road to Easter, full steam ahead to Easter and this experience called Easter, a time of renewal, of rejuvenation, transformation, if we let it be. Now, we're not always going to be getting up in the morning, thrilled to jump out of bed and keep going, okay? I know that doesn't happen with me all the time. Sometimes, yes, but usually I'm jumping up because the cats are jumping on me and they want breakfast, okay? And if I don't, they keep annoying me. So it's better just get up, run in the kitchen, put the food down, and then if I want to, I can go back and relax in bed. But sometimes we don't feel like we would like to in the morning. Sometimes we feel as if emotionally we have fallen down a well of emotions which keep us from feeling the peace of God and the joy of God in our day. Some mornings it's going to be like that. It's tough. But no matter what happens in our life, and no matter how we have responded to our life situations in the past, we can change that this very moment if we want to. We don't have to stay feeling discouraged. We don't have to stay feeling dissed out by circumstances and other people. I'd like to share one of my favorite stories with you. And I think I've shared it with you before, but I'm going to share it again anyway. One day, a farmer's donkey fell down into a well. And the animal cried woefully for hours and hours, okay? And the farmer didn't know what to do, how to get him out of there, or exactly what to do. So he reasoned, well, the donkey's very old, and the well needs to be closed and sealed up anyway, so I'm just going to have to let this be. So he called a bunch of his friends over, and they all grabbed shovels and began filling the well in with dirt. And the donkey, when he realized what was happening here, he sounded even more woeful. He was wailing. Okay? And then, all of a sudden, he got quiet. And so the farmer was curious, and his friends were continuing to throw the dirt in. He got curious and went over and looked down in the well, and he saw something marvelous. The donkey, every time a shovelful of dirt fell down on his back, he would shake it off, and he'd stomp his hooves. I started to say feet, his hooves, okay? I'm from the city. There's no hooves there, okay? He would stomp his hooves, and as this continued, he rose up. And as this process continued, they were all amazed that finally the donkey walked out of the well on level ground, and he trotted away. Yay for the donkey. But what the donkey did is a lesson for all of us. Whenever we feel like life is dumping too much on us, there's a way that we can shake it off, stomp it under our feet, and rise up. Jesus gave us a lot of techniques for that. I'm going to share one later on. But there are a couple of other ways that we can remove the dis from our courage and move beyond those situations that would make us fall back or keep from moving forward in our lives. There's a Better or Worse comic, and this was in last Sunday's paper, I think it was, Salina Journal. And Elizabeth, I guess she's a preteen, I believe. She goes into the living room and she sees her dad stretched out on the couch in the living room. And he doesn't look all that happy. He's a dentist. And Elizabeth says, "Well, what's the matter, Daddy?" And he says, "I don't know, kiddo. I can't tell whether I'm just bored, or whether I'm tired, or I'm depressed about something." And Elizabeth counsels her dad and says, "Everybody feels like that sometimes, Daddy. It's nothing to worry about." And he says, "Well, what do you think you are? Are you a doctor?" And she said, "Nope, but I'm going to write you a prescription." And she writes one out and gives it to her dad and says, "There, now you're going to feel better," and gives him a hug. And Elizabeth's mom comes and she sees what is happening. She said, "Is that a note from Elizabeth, honey? And what does it say?" And he reads the note: "Take 2 hugs and call me in the morning." The other way to remove the dis from your courage is something that I found in one of my joke books. And it was a little card that read, "If you can't sleep, stop talking to the sheep. Talk to the shepherd." I think that's good. I think that would work. My Webster's Dictionary defines disappointment as being something different than discouragement. Disappointment, the dictionary says, is the natural, emotional, human response that we all have, we all experience when a certain outcome doesn't turn out the way we thought it would. Disappointment is usually directed in response to the actions or misactions of others. Discouragement is defined as the inability to rise above the daily disappointments that we all have. It eventually leads to more and more disappointment and ultimately failure. If we are human, and we all are spiritual beings expressing through this human self, then we will all have emotional responses from time to time, which are feelings of disappointment in things. And even Jesus dealt with his feelings of disappointment. I remember a couple of occasions when he expressed his disappointment. One example was when he and his disciples were in the village of Caesarea Philippi. And Jesus had taken Peter, James, and John with him prior to this up on the mountain to pray. And he experienced what the Bible calls transfiguration. And when they came down from the mountain and went to rejoin the other disciples, they saw a great crowd all around them. There was a hubbub of activity, and Jesus stopped and said, "Well, what's going on here? What's happening?" And a man in the crowd said, "Well, I brought my son to your disciples to heal him, and they weren't able to do it." And Jesus then expresses his disappointment. In Mark, the 9th chapter, verse 41, Jesus says, "You faithless generation, how long will I be with you? How long will I have to put up with you? Bring the boy to me," he says. Now, this seems very uncharacteristic of the Jesus that we knew. But I think he was giving an important lesson to the disciples and, indeed, to everyone listening there. And they bring the boy to Jesus to be healed. And Jesus does heal the boy, but before he does that, he speaks to the father and he asks him, do you believe that your son can be healed? And he tells him, all things are possible if you believe. And responding to this, the father says, yes, I believe. Help my unbelief. That is, help me in the areas where I still struggle with my beliefs. And the boy is healed. And a little further down in this same chapter, the 9th chapter of Mark, Jesus offers us a cure for discouragement. He tells us how we can remove the dis from our courage. And let me share it with you. In Mark 9, verses 28 through 29, we read that after the healing of the man's son, Jesus and his disciples went into a house, and there, in private, his disciples asked him, well, why couldn't we heal the boy? Why couldn't we cast out those spirits? And Jesus answered by saying, casting this kind of spirit out requires prayer. There it is. Right there for us is how to overcome discouragement, how to remove the dis from our courage. Jesus tells his disciples, and you and me, that throwing this kind of spirit out, that is, gaining freedom from the spirit of discouragement, once it has taken hold of your heart and your mind, requires a positive, affirmative, faith-filled prayer. This is the kind of prayer that Jesus prayed. It was a knowing and accepting of the good that he sought to have manifest. It is the kind of prayer that we teach in Unity. It's not a begging or a beseeching God to do something, to make a change in something. It is accepting that the good that is inherent in whatever the situation is coming forth, even though we can't see it at the moment. It is the kind of prayer that knows that God, all loving, wants the best for us and for all others. And it is the kind of prayer that trusts that whatever is the highest and best for that person or that situation with whom and for whom we pray is manifesting. Remember, Jesus did say all things are possible if we believe. And we pray a believing prayer. Now, of course, we have to remember that as we spiritual beings are expressing through this humanness, there are blessings that come to us in different forms than what we might expect. You all remember the story of Mr. Smith and the flood? Okay. Mr. Smith stayed in that house while the waters rose, because he was sure that God was going to help him. God was going to save him. So he didn't need the rowboat. He didn't need the helicopter that came by and dropped the line down. God was going to save him. And when he perished and drowned in the water and got the opportunity to speak to God, he was angry. He said, I had faith in you. I trusted you all my life, okay? And I waited for you to come and help me and save me, and you didn't. And he said, well, I don't know what you were expecting, but I sent the rowboat. I sent the helicopter, okay? And I don't know what you want me to say, God said. But hey, I'm glad you're here with me. Our need is to cultivate patience so that we can wait until the good that we know is there inherent in the situation takes on shape and form in our experience. We get impatient, kind of like the child that took the story that the child took his broken toy to God to be fixed, to be mended. And he kept taking it back because God was working too slowly to fix the gift. And finally, the child complained that God wasn't helping and wasn't fixing this toy. And God said, my child, what could I do? You kept taking it back. You were not being patient enough to see the good take shape and form in your experience. Let's not miss this, okay? This is one of the gifts of Easter time, okay? To be able to see even without our eyes and beyond our eyesight, the good that is inherent in every situation, okay? The crucifixion, and looking beyond that to the good, to the symbolism and the meaning that it has for each of us. Jesus had made, on this Palm Day over 2,000 years ago, the Hebrew people were at a very low point. They were discouraged. They had lived under Roman rule, and they were looking for the Messiah. They were looking for their king to come and to set up a holy kingdom on the earth, and they would be free of Roman rule. And Jesus, having made this trip to Jerusalem many times in his life, on this particular day that we call Palm Sunday, it was his final or last entry into Jerusalem. And he was seeking to follow a prophecy that was told in the book of Zechariah. And this prophecy told the people that their king would be coming, and will be coming riding on a lowly beast of burden. Not like a king on a mighty horse, okay? A lowly beast of burden. And so Jesus had his disciples to go into town and to get a donkey. And apparently arrangements were made beforehand because the donkey was there and was ready for him to use. And so he sat on the donkey, and he and his disciples traveled the path into Jerusalem. And the story of the Bible tells us that the people, when they heard that Jesus was coming, now his name was huge now. He'd done miracles and taught in synagogues almost everywhere in all the villages that he went through. And the people knew him. And they were excited to realize that here's the king. This is the king we've been waiting for. And see, he's riding into town on a lowly beast of burden, on a donkey. And so the story goes that on this day, many of them took their outer garments off, and they placed them on the path that Jesus was following into Jerusalem. And they took palm leaves, cut down palm leaves from the trees that lined the road, and they laid those down in homage to the king. And of course, we know that they were expecting Jesus to be an earthly king, and that was not his intent. His kingdom was a spiritual kingdom. And so when this happened, I believe that it was the excitement of this experience and thinking that Jesus was the king. Any discouragement that they may have felt left them as they opened their minds and their hearts to the presence of Jesus, which was expressing the Christ in him. And this presented a healing in them as well. It was only later, when they realized that Jesus was not intending to set up an earthly kingdom, that they gave up on him. And they turned against him. In unity, Jesus achieved the goal of fully expressing the divinity within him. And his teachings and his ministry were about teaching us that we have this same ability to overcome any difficulty, any situation that causes us to feel discouragement. We, too, can rise up. In honor of this tradition and acknowledging the rulership of the Christ Spirit in us on this day, the first day of Holy Week, you are all invited to receive a palm leaf to take home with you. They are on the table right over there.